I always knew I was different from the other kids, not in the cute, quirky way where you wear mismatched socks and eat lunch in the library, but in a way that made adults hesitate before answering my questions. I was the youngest sophomore at Lincoln High in Brookdale, Illinois, having skipped 2 grades, thanks to parents convinced fourth grade wasn't challenging enough for me. I preferred biology over recess poetry over playgrounds. But being smart came with isolation. While most 15-year-olds were adjusting to high school as freshmen, I was dissecting frogs with 17-year-olds who were already prepping for college. The only people I spoke to were Noah, my lab partner who pretended he didn't care about grades, and Amber, who once said she liked my handwriting and never stopped talking to me. Since I never told them I'd skipped grades, experience had taught me how fast smart turned into weird. That Thursday before spring break was ordinary at first. The building smelled like vending machine snacks and bleach. Mr. Leland, our biology teacher, was in the middle of cracking a joke about frogs croaking under pressure when the intercom interrupted with Principal Donovan's voice low and urgent. "Initiate lockdown. This is not a drill." We'd had drills before, but this was different. Mr. Leland moved quickly, locking the door, turning off lights, ushering us to the back wall of the room. We crouched behind lab tables, backpacks still on phones, dimmed, breathing held. Then came the sound, metal doors clanging open. Then silence. We heard faint, distant screaming. At first it was unclear, male maybe, but primal, desperate, angry. Someone began slamming on doors. "Let me in. I know what you did. I know what you are." We were frozen. The voice was closer now, pounding down the hallway door by door. Amber started crying silently. Mr. Leland stayed by the door like a guardian. Then someone's phone buzzed loud in the quiet. We all turned horrified. Kendra turned it off too late. The man stopped outside our room. Then the banging began again, furious, inhuman. His voice screamed about liars, blood, revenge. Glass shattered. A bloody hand reached in through the safety window, fumbling for the lock. Mr. Leland reacted instantly, slamming a metal stool down on the arm, a crack, a scream, and then the hand disappeared. Silence returned heavier than before. Eventually, Sirens Police arrived, weapons drawn. The man was found collapsed near the office, bloodied but unarmed. He wasn't a student or even from town. He had escaped from a psychiatric facility 40 minutes away during a transfer between hospitals. The driver transporting him wasn't trained. The man had broken through the divider, knocked the guard unconscious, and wandered into our school through a door left ajar after morning deliveries. He'd imagined his daughter had been taken by someone at our school. She didn't exist, but the pain, the belief, it was real to him. Afterwards, school was closed for a week. Counselors came. Security was reviewed, but none of it erased what happened. Amber transferred to online classes. Noah went quiet for a month. Mr. Leland quit that summer. I never saw him again, but I remember his calm, his speed, how he placed himself between us and something we couldn't even name. People said it could have been worse, but surviving doesn't erase trauma. It becomes part of you even now. Years later, I flinch at loud footsteps. I check door locks twice. That day taught me something no textbook ever could, about fear instinct and the way the world can shift in an instant. We don't talk about it anymore, not really, but sometimes when the hallways are too quiet, I swear I can still hear that voice screaming for someone who was never there. It echoes not just in memory, but in the silence that follows every unexpected noise, every lockdown drill, every time I sit near a door and wonder what if. Back in the spring of 2016, I was just a quiet freshman trying to survive the weird transitional jungle that is high school. My name's Riley and I went to Greenridge High, tucked in a small wooded town in upstate New York. The kind of place where the biggest drama was who got caught vaping in the locker room or which teacher was secretly dating the football coach. I wasn't popular, not even close. I had a few friends, a C+ in algebra, and a habit of staying up too late watching conspiracy documentaries on YouTube. I sketched a lot in the margins of my notebooks and always walked a long way to class just to avoid the chaos in the main hallways. That's how I first saw the clown. Yes, that clown. You probably remember the 2016 clown panic. Those blurry, low-res clips people kept sharing on Snapchat and Reddit. Clowns loitering in the woods. Clowns waving from across dark streets. Most people thought it was a hoax, just internet attention seekers doing it for Vine or YouTube likes. I was one of them. I rolled my eyes at the entire thing, thought it was dumb and desperate. That is until March 25th. It was 8th period on a Friday afternoon, the kind of day where spring's finally pushing through the last traces of winter. The air still smelled like wet pavement and thawing leaves. I was in world history with Mr. Raymond, dry humor, elbow patch suit jackets, the kind of guy who still said groovy without irony. I'd finished my group project early, so he let me use the restroom without question. The nearest bathroom was under maintenance, so I had to walk through the south wing, an older part of the school with squeaky floors and chipped lockers, way quieter than the rest of the building. I actually liked it for that reason. Less noise, more peace, but as I turned the corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. At the far end of the hallway stood someone in full clown costume, bright yellow pants, oversized shoes, a red and white striped shirt. But it was the mask that chilled me. Plastic white with a permanent grin and black voids for eyes. I laughed awkwardly at first, muttering something like, "Nice commitment, man," assuming it was a prank. But the clown didn't respond. It tilted its head slow, precise. I kept walking, trying to ignore the goosebumps crawling up my arms. I ducked into the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and told myself it was just a theater kid trying to be edgy. But then came the sound click, and then the low beep of the school's intercom system. The principal's voice was strained and rushed. "All students and staff, we are now entering a level 1 lockdown. This is not a drill." My blood went cold. I scrambled to button my jeans, heart racing. I burst out of the stall, and there he was, the clown, standing inside the bathroom, staring at me. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life and kicked the stall door straight into his chest. He stumbled back, slipping on the tiled floor. I didn't look back. I ran. Every classroom I passed was already locked. Every hallway was empty. My footsteps echoed like thunder as I sprinted toward Mr. Raymond's room and pounded on the door. But he just looked at me through the small glass pane and mouthed, "Run." "Hide," I turned again, this time into the janitor's wing. I jiggled random doorknobs until one opened, a tiny utility room filled with water heaters and cleaning supplies. I slammed the door shut behind me, locked it, and slid to the floor. Trembling, I texted my mom, "On lockdown, hiding, I love you." I don't know how long I stayed there. Time slowed, warped, became meaningless. Every sound felt huge, dripping pipes buzzing, machinery, even my own shaky breaths. Then came footsteps. Multiple and voices. Police SWAT. Relief crashed over me as I peeked through the vent. 10 officers, weapons drawn. 2 figures in cuffs. Clowns. One of them had a machete. They weren't pranksters anymore. They were dangerous. Turns out they were seniors, 18 years old, recently suspended for vandalism. They claimed it was a social experiment, a joke. But one had zip ties in his bag, and the sword, though supposedly a prop, was real and sharpened. They were arrested. My parents pulled me out of Green Ridge by the weekend. I didn't argue. I couldn't walk those halls again. I flinched every time I heard rubber shoes or a weird laugh for months. My sketchbooks filled with clown faces, grotesque, hollow-eyed, grinning things. People say the clown craze fizzled out later that year, but not for me. For me, it never ended. Every time I see someone in a costume, every Halloween, every viral prank video, I freeze for just a moment. Because for one Friday in March, the joke wasn't funny. It was real, and it nearly destroyed me. I only took the job because I needed cash to buy a used car, not because I had any deep desire to mop cafeteria floors or scrape gum off lockers. I was in my mid-20s, still trying to figure things out, taking community college courses, helping my mom with bills back home, and dealing with the reality that adulthood wasn't going to wait for me to catch up. Working as a part-time custodian at Hillstone High in Montrose, Illinois, wasn't exactly glamorous, but it gave me flexible hours and just enough income to keep gas in my beat-up sedan. The job was usually peaceful. Quiet hallways, the hum of overhead lights, the rhythmic drag of the mop. But that Tuesday morning was anything but normal. A group of seniors had pulled off some ridiculous year-end prank involving mashed potatoes pudding and what looked like an entire shipment of cafeteria food splattered across every surface in sight. Because of the mess, my supervisor called me in for a rare day shift to help clean up before the next lunch period. So instead of my usual 4 p.m. start, I clocked in at 11 a.m. Gloves on, boots, squeaking, and started scrubbing spaghetti off lunch trays beside Todd. The other custodian, a gruff guy in his late 40s who always chewed gum like it owed him money. We were about halfway done when the loudspeaker crackled to life. Principal Raines came on, and something in her voice made my stomach twist. "Attention," she said, voice tight and trembling. "This is a code red. I repeat, code red. This is not a drill. All staff secure yourselves immediately. Locked doors hide, remain silent. Todd and I looked at each other for half a second, then bolted to the janitorial supply closet in the back corner of the cafeteria. We'd practiced lockdown drills before, but this wasn't a drill, and we knew the difference instantly. The closet was cramped, barely big enough for two adults to stand shoulder to shoulder. Metal shelves, a mop sink, buckets of cleaner, a faint smell of bleach. We slammed the door shut, killed the light, and stood still in the dark. I fumbled for my phone, texted my mom. "School's on lockdown. I'm okay, I'll message when I can." She responded in seconds, panic in her words. "Are you safe? What's happening?" But I didn't know, I couldn't reply. The silence was thick, suffocating. Then the cafeteria doors slammed open so hard the hinges groaned. Heavy, deliberate footsteps followed. Not the rushed clatter of a scared student, but slow, measured, almost gleeful. Then a voice high-pitched and sing-song, but laced with something deeply wrong. "I know you're hiding it," called out, come out, wherever you are." The voice was female, but something about it felt off, too rehearsed, like a bad impression of childhood innocence, with a razor hidden beneath it. Todd whispered, barely audible, "She's got a weapon." I nodded. We could hear something scraping against the cafeteria furniture, the unmistakable metallic screech of a knife or blade dragging across a plastic chair. My blood ran cold. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, loud, vibrating against my thigh. In the dead silence, I nearly dropped it, trying to mute it, but it was too late. The footsteps stopped. Then came the creaking, slow and deliberate. The sound of someone walking directly toward the closet door. We could hear her breath through the thin wood. "You in there," she whispered louder now. "I see you." I didn't know if she actually could, but the certainty in her tone made my skin crawl. The doorknob jiggled violently. Todd reached for the nearest thing he could find, an old broken broom handle. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I crouched slightly, heart pounding, body ready to react. Then through the madness, a voice yelled from the hallway. "Police, drop the weapon." The woman shrieked an inhuman sound, followed by thudding footsteps shouting a scuffle, then silence. We stayed frozen until we heard another voice say, "Janitorial staff, come out slowly," hands visible. Todd opened the door, and I followed close behind. What I saw haunts me. A tall woman, thin, pale, sweat-drenched hair clinging to her forehead, was handcuffed on the cafeteria floor. Her shirt was stained with blood, but not her own. Her eyes were wild, unfocused, and she kept muttering gibberish that made no sense. She wasn't a parent, she wasn't staff. No ID. She had walked in off the street after slipping through the front entrance when the door hadn't latched properly after a morning delivery. We later learned she had escaped a nearby mental health facility and hadn't taken her medication in weeks. She struck the receptionist with a blunt object and had already attacked Principal Raines before triggering the lockdown. But what sticks with me most wasn't her. Wasn't the knife or the screaming. It was what Officer Brennan told us afterward. We were returning from a different call. He said, his voice low, "If we'd been even 2 minutes further out, she would have found you first." That was it for me. I quit the next day. Didn't give notice, just walked away. You don't come back from something like that the same. Even now, years later, when the house is too quiet, I still hear her voice mocking sing-song, slowly coming closer. It was supposed to be an easy day, the kind I'd earned after front-loading my junior year with AP classes and summer courses. Senior year was coasting just 3 core classes, and the freedom to sleep in, roll out of bed at 9:45, and cruise into East Ridge High while most of my classmates were already halfway through their 3rd period. That Tuesday morning in January, nothing felt different. I brewed my usual gas station coffee through on the same hoodie I'd worn 3 times that week and let the bass from my car speakers drown out the cold as I pulled into the student lot at 10:30 a.m. It was the same route past Carter's Diner, the boarded-up laundromat and the Shell station with overpriced gas. But something was off. The lot had cars, but no people, no loitering seniors, no skateboards clacking against the sidewalk, not even a teacher sipping from a travel mug in the staff lot. Just silence. I remember standing at the entrance, one hand on the glass, hesitating. The lobby doors weren't locked. They never were during school hours, but inside the building felt hollow. Not empty, but wrong. The lights were on, but no one was in sight. All the classroom doors were shut tight, which was rare for East Ridge. Usually teachers propped them open with doorstops or chairs unless they were giving a test. I was still trying to make sense of it when I pulled out my phone and checked my notifications. 5 unread texts from Leo Jackson. My best friend since freshman year. He never texted during class, ever. I read the first message and my stomach dropped. Dude, something weird's going on. Doors locked. Think there's a guy in the building. The second one, they said knives don't come in. The last one hit like a punch. Please, man, stay out. I'm not joking. My body went cold. I looked around, really looked, and that's when I heard them, footsteps. Not running, not rushed, just slow, deliberate rubber soles squeaking softly on the tile. I didn't have time to think. Instinct took over. I ran, not toward the exit like I should have, but deeper into the building, toward the auditorium. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe I was just trying to find a room that locked. I pushed through the double doors just as a voice echoed behind me. Raspy close. Hey there! The door slammed shut. I bolted toward the stage and ducked behind the thick velvet curtain. My chest heaved, my breath caught in my throat. He was behind me. I could hear his boots on the carpeted stairs, feel the weight of his presence like it was pressing against my back. I killed the sound on my phone and crawled behind a stack of stage props, my whole body vibrating with panic. Then, like a miracle, one of the backstage doors creaked open. A face peeked through, Mr. Hanley, the janitor. He locked eyes with me, held a finger to his lips, and motioned frantically. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled through the door, and we squeezed into a narrow utility room filled with paint cans and old lighting rigs. Hanley locked the door behind us, then sat on an overturned bucket and whispered, "Don't move." Outside, the man paced the stage, muttering words. I couldn't make out the wood creaking under his weight. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone. I didn't even know who to text. My mom. Leo. The police, I didn't know if I had time. We stayed like that for what felt like hours until we heard the sirens. Hanley looked at me and whispered one word. Cops. That's when the man started running. Heavy boots pounding the floor. Then gone. The officers stormed the school minutes later. It was over. Just like that, they escorted me to the nurse's office where I found a few other students wrapped in blankets crying or staring blankly. I told the officer everything. What I saw, what I heard, how close it had been. The man they caught had hopped the back fence behind the football field. He didn't belong to the school. Didn't know anyone. The knife they found on him was a 10-inch hunting blade. He never said why he chose East Ridge. Maybe it was random. Maybe it wasn't. No one knows how he got in, and that scares me more than anything. The cameras had been disabled wires cut near the junction box. There were no clear images of him. Just one blurry shot from an outdoor camera by the gym. That night, I didn't sleep. For days after every locker slam, every fire drill made me jump. I still hear his voice sometimes in dreams, raspy, calm, too casual for what he planned to do. Hey there, I used to think school was the safest place in the world. After that day, I never thought that again. I used to think fall was the safest time of year. Cool breezes, changing leaves, and the comforting rhythm of school routines. That illusion shattered the day I saw him. My name is Natalie Clark, and I was 16, a junior at Ridgeview High in Montgomery, Illinois. I wasn't one of the popular kids, not a social outcast either. Just someone in the middle coasting along, turning in my homework, eating lunch with the same two friends, and walking home every day through tree-lined sidewalks. I liked sitting by the window in Earth Science second row from the back corner seat, my quiet place where I could daydream or sneak peeks at the football field. That morning, the air felt different. Phelps, our teacher, was lecturing about plate tectonics and complaining about how movies always get volcanoes wrong when I saw something out the window. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow shifting near the edge of the trees, maybe a groundskeeper or a jogger. But then he stepped forward, tall, still a face half hidden under a knit cap. His clothes were stained. He didn't move. He didn't look around. He just stared, and I stared back. I raised my hand, heart starting to hammer Mr. Phelps. He turned annoyed. There's someone outside, by the trees, just standing there. A few students glanced out the window. But by the time Mr. Phelps joined them, the man was gone. There's no one out there, he said flatly. Let's stay focused. The class chuckled, but I couldn't shake it. Something about him had felt wrong, too still, too silent. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him unmoving, watching. At 11:30 p.m., I heard it. A soft scratching, barely audible at first, then louder, more deliberate. Dragging across glass, I sat up in bed, dread twisting in my chest, my window. I turned slowly and saw the edge of a figure ducking out of sight. I ran straight into my mom's room. Breathless, someone's outside. At my window, she grabbed her phone and opened our home's security app. Nothing showed up at first, then she zoomed in on the feed. My window was open. I always locked it. She called 911. The police arrived quickly and searched the yard. What they found in the woods behind the school shook everyone. A makeshift campsite, torn blankets, a rusted pan, empty bottles, and a journal. The last page showed a hand-drawn sketch of Ridgeview High, and beneath my window, 3 words scribbled in jagged handwriting. It's time for a week. The school added patrols, locked more doors, and double check-ins. But they never found him. He vanished. I started walking home with friends. I kept my phone close, stopped sitting by the window. I hoped the fear would fade. Then came the lockdown. It was a Thursday, 4th period. Government class with Mr. Burnham. We were discussing civic responsibilities when the intercom buzzed. Our principal's voice calm but slow. Attention staff and students. We are entering lockdown. This is not a drill. Silence followed. Mr. Burnham locked the door, shut off the lights, and gestured for us to huddle in the corner. I pulled out my phone and texted my mom. Lockdown, not a drill. She didn't respond right away. One girl started crying quietly. Then we heard footsteps. Not hurried, slow. Careful, they stopped outside our door. The handle jiggled. Knock, 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 hollow, and measured like someone knocking on a coffin. Mr. Burnham raised a finger to his lips. No one moved. My phone buzzed. A reply from Mom. Stay hidden, police on the way. Love you. Then the lights went out. Somewhere in the building, someone screamed. A loud crash. Distant shouts. We sat frozen, waiting for the end. Then came the yelling officers shouting. Clear and hallway secured. Finally, the door opened. Police in tactical gear guided us out one by one. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. I saw more officers near the edge of the woods. They'd found more than the campsite this time. Shallow holes dug in the dirt like graves. One held a mannequin, another a picture of me. No one knew who he was. No fingerprints, no ID. He had slipped into the school during morning drop-off, knew where my class was, knew where I sat. After that, I stopped walking home. My dog sleeps in my room, now by the door. Ridgeview installed metal detectors, updated locks, and hired extra security, but it doesn't matter. Every knock at the door makes me freeze. Every shadow outside my window looks like him. People say it could have been worse, but sometimes just surviving feels like a scar you carry in silence. I still wonder if he'll come back. If next time he won't knock, he'll just step inside. I hadn't planned on being alone that day. I certainly hadn't planned on hiding in the dark, breath held while someone tore apart the room around me. But that's what happened. My name is Emily. And during the spring of my senior year at Northridge High, I learned that the quietest places in a school can also become the most terrifying. It started with something simple, a missed math test. I'd been out for 2 days with an ear infection, half conscious from antibiotics. And when I returned Thursday morning, Miss Darnell slid a stapled packet across my desk with all the urgency of tossing out junk mail. Take it to the annex, he said, barely looking up from his desk. No proctor, just do your best, I trust you. I nodded, not fully processing it. I didn't know then that his trust would soon feel like a curse. The annex was a newly renovated space hidden behind the South Gym, part of an old AV room that had been forgotten for years. Over the summer, the school district had thrown on a fresh coat of paint, added a few dusty computers, a whiteboard, and called it a quiet study area. Most students didn't use it. Some joked that it felt off, like the air didn't move right, like it had bad energy. I'd never been inside before that day. I figured it was just another weird school rumor. The walk there was long, taking me through empty locker rooms and silent corridors. When I reached the annex, I had to flick the lights several times before the flickering fluorescence fully kicked on. The air was stale, cold. There were no windows, only one door. I chose a table near it and got started on the test. I was halfway through question 3 when the wall phone rang. The noise echoed like an alarm. My heart skipped. I didn't even know the room had a phone. Beige old wall, mounted like something from a hospital in the 80s. I hesitated, then picked it up. This is Emily. I'm in the annex, I said. A voice replied, fast and urgent. This is the main office. We are currently in a lockdown. I repeat, this is not a drill. Lock the door and follow protocol immediately. The line went dead. My hand froze around the receiver. Lockdown. I turned to the door. There was no proper lock, just a flimsy latch near the top. I clicked it into place and pushed a chair under the handle. Then I shut off the overhead lights and crouched between a table and the far wall. My body trembling. I fumbled for my phone, turned the screen, brightness down, and saw I had no signal. No texts, just silence. Every second dragged. Every creak from the building sounded like footsteps. Then the door creaked, the latch moved, and before I could do anything, the door opened with a groan. The chair screeched across the tile. A figure stepped inside, black work boots. Heavy breathing. No words. Just slow, deliberate steps. I flattened myself against the wall, barely breathing. The man moved toward the center of the room, still silent, then started destroying everything. A computer monitor crashed to the ground. Then another. He screamed a deep, guttural, rage-filled yell and slammed fists into tables. Plastic and metal cracked. A chair flew across the room. I wanted to scream, to cry, to vanish, but I stayed still, shaking so violently I thought he'd hear my bones. Then he went silent again. A long, crushing silence. I knew I couldn't stay. I eyed the door 12 feet away. He was still on the far end. I took a breath, summoned what little courage I had, and ran. The noise behind me surged, shouts, crashes, another scream. But I didn't stop. I burst into the hallway and ran. Down the gym corridor, past the locker rooms, past the vending machines and trophy cases. Until I saw them, two police officers near the front office, I screamed. "He's in the annex. He's destroying everything." One officer ran past me, hand on his weapon. The other stayed with me, guiding me into the nurse's office where other students were huddled. I wasn't the only one who had seen him. A girl from chemistry sobbed quietly in the corner. A soccer player sat pale and shivering. "Was anyone hurt?" I asked. The nurse gently placed a blanket around my shoulders and whispered, "You're safe now. That's what matters." The man, they later told us, was a local with a long history of mental illness and arrests. He'd slipped in through a service door left open during gym. He didn't have a weapon, but he destroyed nearly everything in the annex before being subdued. The space was shut down for the rest of the year, then quietly repurposed into storage, erased like it never happened. But I remember the moment the phone rang. The moment I realized I wasn't alone. The chaos, yes, but more than that, the silence before, that thick, unnatural stillness that told me something had already gone wrong. I never did finish that test. Mr. Darnell gave me a B. Said it was fine, but nothing really felt fine after that. I still flinch when I hear phones ring in empty rooms. Still hesitate before stepping into places where I might be alone. Because I know now somewhere out there, someone always finds the quietest places. First, freshman year was supposed to be the start of something new. Nervous introductions, awkward lunch periods, figuring out how to open a combination lock without looking like a total idiot. I never expected it to include something I'd still be dreaming about years later. My name's Aaron, and I was 14 when it happened. Bellwood High wasn't special. Just your average mid-sized school tucked along the outskirts of Oregon, where foggy mornings blurred pine tree skylines, and teachers mispronounced names with the confidence of game show hosts. That Thursday afternoon in civics class with Mrs. Delaney started off like any other dry erase markers squeaking on the board, classmates yawning like synchronized swimmers. Then the phone rang. Her face shifted one moment, routine the next, rigid. "Everyone quiet," she said, dropping the receiver. "This is not a drill. We're going into lockdown." You could feel the words settle in the room like dust, that thick, suffocating kind. We all moved quickly, not joking or whispering, like during the usual fire drills. Mrs. Delaney killed the lights, locked the door, and herded us to the corner. The seconds stretched like hours. A sound, footsteps in the hallway made our breaths catch. They weren't rushed, just a slow, almost confident pace. They passed by. And then silence. After what felt like a lifetime, the intercom crackled to life. "Lockdown has been lifted. Resume your scheduled activities." We were jittery, confused, but relieved. Later that day, we found out that someone had been seen near the science wing, unidentified. The staff thought he'd slipped out, but no announcements came. No warnings to parents, just rumors and that strange, eerie feeling that lingered even after the final bell. By Friday morning, most people acted like it hadn't happened. Bellwood had a way of brushing things under the rug, letting time blur over unease. But for me, the unease hadn't faded. My third period teacher, Mr. Evans, tried to make things feel normal with his usual jokes and laid-back attitude. Halfway through class, I asked to use the restroom. "Sure, be quick," he said, tossing me the hall pass. I walked down the corridor toward the East Wing restrooms, the quiet ones, the kind no one used during class. I pushed the door open and immediately froze. A man stood inside. Not a student. He had the look of someone who didn't belong anywhere. Mid-30s, maybe? Beard, scruffy eyes, sharp and wide. He wore a knit hat too big for his head and a jacket that hung off him like it had once belonged to someone else. For a second, we just stared at each other. I felt my body go cold. Then he stepped toward me. I didn't wait. I turned and ran my sneakers screeching against the floor. I didn't stop until I slammed into Mr. Evans' door. "There's a man in the bathroom," I yelled. His face went pale. He peeked out into the hallway, then pulled me inside. "Get in the back," he said to the class, then turned to the phone. Moments later, the intercom came alive again. "This is a lockdown. This is not a drill." The tension this time was unbearable. Everyone dropped to the floor. No one whispered. No one dared to speak. An hour passed. Footsteps, doors opening. No screams, no sounds of violence, but fear wrapped itself around us like a fog. When we were finally released, I made my way to the lobby, and that's when I saw him. The same man now in handcuffs, flanked by two officers. His eyes were wide, like he was surprised it was over. Later that day, word spread that he had hidden in the building overnight. During the first lockdown, he hadn't fled. He'd just disappeared somewhere inside. The thought alone made my stomach twist. He didn't have a weapon. Police said he might have been homeless, possibly mentally ill. No one was hurt, but when I remembered his eyes and the way he stepped toward me, I knew he was dangerous. That weekend, the school brought in extra security, updated their camera systems, even assigned a second school resource officer. But nothing erased that moment for me. Monday came and I returned to my routine. Civics class again, Mrs. Lindstrom now substituting. She greeted me like nothing had happened. 15 minutes in, the intercom buzzed. "Can you send Aaron Thomas to the office, please? He has an early dismissal." My heart skipped. My mom hadn't mentioned anything about picking me up. I grabbed my bag and walked the same halls where the fear had just begun to fade. As I rounded the corner near the office, a man stood there, long coat, black beanie, smiling. Not the same man, but he looked so similar, it chilled me. The secretary opened the door, smiled. "There you are, Aaron. Your uncle's here." I didn't have an uncle. I bolted. Ran down the hallway, didn't stop for my locker or even for answers. I ran all the way home. That night, my mom confirmed what I already knew. She hadn't sent anyone. The school claimed it was a miscommunication, that a substitute had misunderstood a message. But I know what I saw. And now every time the intercom buzzes or someone says my name over the speaker, I feel that chill again. Because I don't think he was ever caught. Not really. And I don't think he was alone. I used to love autumn. There was something about the crispness in the air, the way leaves turned from green to fire, and how the wind carried the scent of chimney smoke, that always made me feel grounded. But ever since that day, fall reminds me of how fragile safety really is. My name's Natalie Clark. I was 16 at the time, just a regular junior at Ridgeview High in Montgomery, Illinois. I wasn't special. Not a popular kid, not a loner. Just someone who blended in. I had my routines, got to earth. Science early claimed the corner seat by the window in the second row from the back, and used the 10 minutes before class to watch the trees lining the edge of the school's track field. It was calming, a small escape before lectures started. That Thursday morning, Mr. Phelps was ranting about how movies always butcher the science behind volcanoes when I noticed something out of place. A flicker of movement at the edge of the woods caught my eye. At first, I dismissed it. Probably just a squirrel or some kid skipping class, but then I saw him. A man half hidden behind a pine tree. He didn't move, just stood there, stiff in stained clothes and a knit cap pulled low over his face. He wasn't a jogger or a parent. He wasn't supposed to be there. Something about the stillness of his posture, how he blended in just enough to almost go unnoticed, made my stomach turn. I raised my hand and told Mr. Phelps what I saw. He humored me for a second, even got the class to turn and look. But by then the man had vanished. "There's no one out there," he said flatly, brushing it off like it was nothing. The class chuckled. I faked a laugh too, but my hands were ice cold. That day I didn't linger after school like usual. Normally I'd wait around for Emily or grab a snack from the vending machine, but something told me to go. The 10-minute walk home felt longer than ever. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that figure again watching me from the trees. By the time I reached my driveway, I was practically running. My mom was in the kitchen on her laptop. "You okay, Nat?" she asked casually. I told her what I'd seen, how someone had been standing outside the school just watching. She tried to reassure me. "Probably a groundskeeper or someone cutting through," she said, brushing it off like Mr. Phelps had. I wanted to believe her as I tried. But that night I couldn't sleep. My heart jumped at every creak and gust of wind against the siding. Then just before midnight I heard it. A faint scratching, almost imperceptible at first, like nails dragging across glass. I held my breath, then louder. A slow, deliberate scraping against my bedroom window. My pulse exploded. I turned and saw a shadow move. A hand someone ducked out of sight. I ran to my mom's room breathless. There's someone outside my window. I gasped. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and pulled up our backyard security camera feed. He's not there anymore, she whispered. But then she zoomed in. My window was open. I'd locked it. I know I had. She was already calling the police. They arrived within 10 minutes. I told them everything from the man at school to the window. One of the officers gave the other a look. There's a wooded lot behind Ridgeview, he said. We'll check it. When they came back, their expressions were tight. We found a campsite, the older one said. Someone's been living out there, and we found this. He handed my mom a small, tattered journal in a plastic evidence bag. On the last page was a crude drawing of my classroom window with the words, "It's time," scrawled beneath. My blood ran cold. The school installed extra security the next day. More patrols, more staff near exits, but no one ever found the man. He disappeared. A week later it happened. It was fourth period government class. I remember the exact moment our principal's voice crackled through the intercom. Attention staff and students. We are entering lockdown. This is not a drill. Silence fell like a curtain. Mr. Burnham locked the door shut, off the lights, pulled the blackout curtain over the window, and motioned for us to the far corner. I could barely breathe. My hands shook as I texted my mom. Lockdown, not a drill, no answer. 10 minutes passed. Then 20, then we heard footsteps. Slow measured, pausing outside our door. The handle jiggled. 3 loud knocks followed. Hollow, deliberate. One of the girls whimpered. Mr. Burnham raised a finger to his lips. Then came the most chilling part. The lights went out. Someone screamed somewhere in the school. A crash echoed down the hall. We stayed frozen. Eventually, police voices shouted, "Clear the hallway." When they opened the door, rifles drawn, we were escorted out in groups. In the woods behind the school, they found more than the campsite. They found holes. Shallow graves. One held a mannequin. Another had a photo of me. The man knew where I sat, where I lived. He was never caught. Now, I don't sit by windows anymore. I don't walk home alone. We got a dog. He sleeps in my room, curled by the door, like a guard. The school added metal detectors, upgraded locks, but none of it erases what happened, because he's still out there. And every time I hear an unexpected knock, I wonder, is it him? Is it time? I never thought coming to school late would nearly get me killed. Senior year was supposed to be easier, a reward for years of hard work. Thanks to overloaded junior classes and a few summer credits, my senior schedule was so light I didn't have to show up until fourth period. It was like getting a bonus hour of sleep and skipping the morning chaos that came with teenagers fighting over parking spots and locker space. I'd usually pull into the student lot around 10:30 a.m., right as everyone else was halfway through second period. That Tuesday morning in January, everything seemed normal. I rolled past Carter's Diner, waved at the guy who worked at the old laundromat, and sipped coffee from a chipped thermos that barely kept it warm. My playlist was in full swing. Something with heavy bass, and I ignored the constant buzzing of notifications piling up on my phone. Probably Leo again sending dumb memes or complaining about calculus. I figured I'd respond later. But when I pulled into East Ridge High's parking lot, I noticed something that made the hairs on my arms rise. The cars were there same as always, but the school felt abandoned. No one was outside, no student cutting across the grass, no teachers chatting at the front doors. Just silence. Thick, eerie, unnatural silence. I checked the time, 10:34 a.m. I wasn't late. So why did the building feel like it was holding its breath? The front doors weren't locked, which was unusual during class hours, but not unheard of. I stepped inside expecting to hear the faint sounds of lessons or sneakers squeaking on gym floors, maybe even the click of someone typing in the computer lab, but the halls were dead quiet. Every classroom door was shut. That was the biggest red flag. At East Ridge, teachers almost always left their doors cracked unless there was a test, but now every single one was sealed shut. Like the building was trying to hide something or someone. My stomach turned as I finally checked my phone. 5 unread texts from Leo, all time-stamped within the last 10 minutes. Dude, something weird's going on. Teachers just locked the doors. Some guy's in the building. Knives, they think he has one. Don't come in. Please, that last message hit me like a fist to the chest. I stood frozen in the middle of the hallway, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the silence. Then I heard its shoes lightly scuffing across the tile. Not hurried, not panicked, just walking. Steady, deliberate, getting closer. Panic lit up my body like fire. I bolted. My legs took over before my brain could catch up. I sprinted past classrooms praying one would open and a teacher would pull me inside. No one did. I ran straight to the auditorium, hoping it might still be unlocked. It was. I shoved the door open, slipped inside, and let it close quietly behind me. The room was dark except for the emergency exit sign glowing red above the stage. I ducked behind the heavy velvet curtain, my chest heaving. Then I heard it, boots on carpeted steps. Someone had followed me in. I reached into my pocket and silenced my phone, just as the stage creaked. Whoever was out there was moving slowly, muttering to themselves in a voice too low to make out. I crouched, crawling toward the side wings, praying I wouldn't make a sound. That's when the back door cracked open. A familiar face peeked in. Mr. Hanley, the janitor. He locked eyes with me and pressed a finger to his lips, motioning me over. I didn't hesitate. I slipped behind the door and followed him into a narrow utility room filled with mops and buckets. We locked the door and sat in the dark. He put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Don't make a sound." Outside, the footsteps paused. We could hear him pacing. The muttering turned into yelling, sharp bursts of anger that echoed off the walls. I held my breath. My fingers were ice. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, not even knowing who I'd call if I could. We waited 5 minutes 10. Then came the sirens. Mr. Hanley's eyes lit up. "Pops," he whispered. We heard the man bolt his boots thudding across the floor as he sprinted away. When the officers finally entered, rifles drawn, they cleared the school in 15 minutes. Turns out a student had spotted the man hopping the fence behind the football field. The school went into lockdown fast, but I'd walked in after the fact. Right into the middle of it. The man never hurt anyone. He didn't speak to anyone. The knife they found on him was a 10-inch hunting blade. He wasn't from our school. He wasn't even from our town. No one ever figured out how he got in. The weirdest part, there were no photos. The security cameras had been disabled, cut from the main junction box in the hall. The only image police had was a blurry still from a motion camera by the gym. Nothing more, no name, no known history, just a face lost in the static. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Leo didn't come back for 2 weeks. Every time a locker slammed or someone dropped a book, I flinched. And just when I thought things were going back to normal, the intercom buzzed again. "Aaron Thomas to the office, please." Early dismissal. But my mom hadn't told me anything. As I turned the corner, there he was. A man waiting outside the office, long coat, black beanie, same expression, same eyes. "There you are, Aaron." The secretary smiled. "Your uncle's here." I didn't have an uncle. I ran all the way home, and I haven't stopped looking over my shoulder since. It started with a shadow in the trees, a flicker of movement just beyond the window pane of my earth science class on a crisp Thursday morning. Fall had just crept into Montgomery, Illinois, and Ridgeview High smelled like old books and pumpkin hand sanitizer. I remember sitting in my usual spot, second row from the back, by the window overlooking the track and pine tree border. It was my favorite seat, quiet, detached. Mr. Phelps was mid-rant about how movies butcher plate tectonics, and I was only half listening until I noticed him. A man just standing there, half concealed behind a tree, too stiff to be a jogger, too still to be a student. His clothes were stained, his knit cap pulled low over his face. He wasn't moving, just watching. I raised my hand, heart ticking faster. "Mr. Phelps, there's someone outside by the trees." His eyes flicked to the window, but by then the man was gone. "There's no one out there," he said, his voice lined with irritation. The class snickered. I laughed too, but it felt forced. That chill you get in your gut when something is wrong, it stayed with me all day. I didn't hang around after school. Usually I'd linger, chat with Emily, maybe grab a vending machine snack. But not that day. I left as soon as the bell rang. My walk home was only 10 minutes, and I knew every sidewalk crack by heart. But this time, every leaf crunch behind me sounded like a step, and I kept looking over my shoulder, seeing nothing but the unease crawled under my skin. I ran the last block home and locked the door behind me. My mom was in the kitchen, barely looking up from her laptop. "You okay, Nat?" I told her what I saw. Her smile faltered. "Probably nothing, a groundskeeper maybe," she said, but she kissed my forehead a little too tightly. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing things, scratching, a faint drag against glass. Then louder, my window. I turned and saw movement, an arm ducking out of view. I ran, slammed into my mom's room, gasping. "Someone's outside." She pulled up the security camera feed, her mouth going slack. "The window. It's open." "I locked it," I whispered. She was already dialing 911. 10 minutes later, flashing lights painted our lawn. The police found no one outside, but when they searched the woods behind Ridgeview the next morning, they found a makeshift campsite, torn clothing, a rotting backpack, and a journal. The last page showed a crude drawing of my school, my classroom window, and underneath, in shaky handwriting, the words, "It's time security was beefed up. Patrols staffed by the exits." But a week later, the intercom buzzed during fourth period. "This is not a drill. Initiate lockdown protocols immediately." The words were slow, deliberate, too calm to be comforting. Mr. Burnham, our government teacher, locked the door, pulled the blackout curtain, and motioned us to the back corner. No one whispered this time. I texted my mom. "Lockdown, not a drill," no answer. Then came the footsteps in the hallway, slow, purposeful. They stopped outside our door, the knob jiggled, then 3 knocks. Hollow, measured like someone tapping on a coffin. We froze. I could hear someone crying softly. Another knock. Silence, then darkness. The lights went out. Somewhere someone screamed. A crash echoed down the hall. We didn't move. Not even when my phone buzzed. My mom finally texting back, "Stay hidden, police on the way." "Love you." Eventually we heard the shouting officers clearing the rooms, barking commands. When they opened our door, their rifles were raised. We left in groups. My legs trembled as I stepped into the hallway. Outside chaos, but the man was already gone. Later, police found more in the woods than just a campsite, whole shallow graves, one filled with a mannequin. Another had a photo of me. We still don't know who he was. No fingerprints, no ID, nothing, but the journal was real. The scratches on my window were real, and he knew which window was mine. Now, I don't sit near windows. I don't walk home alone. We got a dog. He sleeps in my room, always by the door. The school installed metal detectors. Every door has new locks. But the feeling, the cold prickling fear, when the world outside stops feeling safe, never really left. Because the scariest part wasn't the knock or the footsteps. It's the fact that no one ever caught him. And every time I hear an unexpected knock, a branch against the siding, or a thump at night, I wonder, is he back? Is it time? The annex was supposed to be just another dusty corner of Northridge High. A forgotten nook, refurbished into a quiet study room, tucked behind the south gym. I hadn't even planned on being there that day. I'd missed 2 days of school from an ear infection that left my head buzzing like a broken speaker. And though I was still foggy and half dazed from antibiotics, I showed up Thursday morning trying to piece my routine back together. Mr. Darnell, our over-caffeinated math teacher, in his perpetually wrinkled corduroy blazer, barely looked up when I came in. He slid a test across the desk. "Make it up during study hall. Annex room. You know where that is?" I nodded, even though I didn't. He waved me off with the usual half-hearted trust he gave everyone, like if we cheated, it wasn't really his problem anymore. So I headed toward the south gym, weaving past echoing locker rooms and empty hallways until I reached the door to the annex. It smelled like bleach and stillness. One click of the light switch brought flickering fluorescent tubes to life. The air felt colder than it should have been. There were 6 tables, 3 aging computers against the far wall, and 0 windows. It felt like being sealed in. I picked the table closest to the door and dropped my backpack with a tired sigh. The test looked manageable, 4 pages, some multiple choice, a few word problems. I set my phone to silent and started scribbling. Question 3, something about rates and slopes. That's when the phone rang. Not my phone, not any of the phones I thought were in use. It came from a beige wall-mounted unit in the corner I hadn't even noticed before. The ring echoed sharp and wrong in the silence, slicing through the air like a fire alarm. I hesitated, then picked up. "This is Emily. I'm in the annex." My voice sounded small. The line crackled, then a voice replied, tight and urgent. "This is the main office. We are currently in lockdown. This is not a drill. Lock the door and follow lockdown protocol immediately." Click, that was it. No further instructions, just a voice and then nothing. My chest tightened. I turned to the door. No automatic lock, just a metal latch in my own panic. I slid it into place, jammed a chair under the handle like I'd seen in movies, and turned off the lights. The silence pressed in, hard. No footsteps, no yelling, nothing. I sat down on the floor behind a table near the far wall, heart thudding. The glow from the computer monitors pulsed like distant lightning. I pulled out my phone, no signal, no texts, no updates, just that gut-deep feeling that something was wrong. Then I heard it. The latch shifted. My body froze, the door creaked open. The chair scraped loudly across the floor. A boot stepped into the room, heavy black. My lungs stopped working. He didn't speak, didn't yell, just moved slowly further in. He wasn't a teacher. I could feel that truth before I could see his face, just that single boot step after another. He reached the middle of the room and stood there motionless. Then chaos, a crash. One of the computers smashed to the ground, screaming. Not mine, his. Low animalistic, like something primal had taken hold. More crashing followed. Chairs thrown, desks overturned. I curled tighter into the shadows, praying he wouldn't come closer. My fingers trembled against my phone's cool surface. I considered running, but every time I shifted my weight, something inside screamed, "Don't move." But when he began hurling metal chairs like toys, I knew I wouldn't survive if I stayed. I took a breath so shallow it barely counted, then launched myself toward the door. I slammed into a table leg, bit my tongue, didn't stop. I burst into the hallway, sprinting past lockers, vending machines, and the vacant trophy case. My chest burned, my head throbbed, but I ran like the building was on fire. When I turned the corner into the main hall, I saw them, two officers near the front office. One raised a hand toward his holster. I screamed, "He's in the annex." They didn't hesitate. One ran, the other stayed with him, his voice calm but his eyes wide. I sat shaking in the nurse's office, next to two other students. One girl sobbing into her hoodie sleeve, a boy from the soccer team whose knuckles were white around his phone. The man they found had no weapon, but he had destroyed the room. Everything was smashed. He'd gotten in through a service entrance left unlocked during gym class. He was local, mentally unstable with a string of prior arrests. He hadn't hurt anyone, not physically, but the sound of his voice, the violence in his scream that stays with me. For weeks, I couldn't walk past that corridor without looking over my shoulder. The annex was closed off again, turned into storage like before, like pretending it hadn't happened would erase it. But I remember the silence, the sound of a door opening, the weight of knowing you are truly, utterly alone, and someone else is there. When I first started at Bellwood High, I never thought much of school lockdowns. They felt like overacted drills, routine like fire alarms or tornado warnings meant to be taken seriously, but always ending with an eye roll and a groan. That all changed a few weeks into my freshman year. Bellwood was nestled on the outskirts of Oregon, surrounded by pine trees and too much nothing. A place where everyone knew your last name and rumors traveled faster than Wi-Fi. On the surface, it was just another Thursday afternoon in Mrs. Delaney's civics class, the kind of day that smelled like old paper and dry erase markers, where half the class mentally checked out before the final bell. The phone rang and Mrs. Delaney's expression changed in an instant. She stiffened, listened for just a moment, then hung up and barked, "This is not a drill. Lockdown now." Her tone stripped away any doubt. Something was wrong. Lights off, door locked, everyone crammed into the back of the classroom. We huddled against cold linoleum, breathing shallow, trying to convince ourselves it was all just a precaution. But the tension in Mrs. Delaney's face said otherwise. It didn't feel like a drill. Then the footsteps came, soft but deliberate, echoing down the hallway. Not running, just walking, every second stretched like hours. Finally, the PA buzzed back to life. Lockdown has been lifted. Resume scheduled activities. But when we emerged, things weren't normal. The parking lot was swarmed with police cruisers and whispers spread fast. Someone said a man had been seen near the science wing. Another said he'd gotten inside. Later that night, my friend Nico texted his mom, worked in administration. They think someone slipped in through a back door. He ran. No one caught him. I barely slept. But by Friday, the school was back to normal, like nothing had happened. Still, something felt off. The way people avoided eye contact, the lack of follow-up announcements like the school wanted it buried. That same day in third period, U.S. history. I asked to use the restroom. Mr. Evans handed me the pass and cracked a joke. Like always, I walked the usual corridor toward the East Wing bathrooms. Normally quiet during class, I opened the door and froze. A man stood inside, not a student, mid-30s maybe, with long black hair, scruffy beard, oversized coat. He looked at me wide-eyed and startled. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he stepped toward me. I didn't wait. I ran. Hard-hammering lungs, burning. I sprinted back to Mr. Evans's room yelling, "There's a man in the bathroom." He didn't hesitate. He threw open the door and told me to get inside. The PA clicked on again. Lockdown. This is not a drill. The fear this time was different, thick and real. No one whispered. No one moved. After an hour, another announcement, lockdown over, students dismissed. When I got to the lobby, two officers were there. Between them in handcuffs was the man. It was him. Somehow he had stayed in the building overnight hiding. They said he was homeless, mentally unstable, unarmed. But I knew what I saw in his eyes. He was dangerous. After that, the school installed more cameras, better locks, even hired another school resource officer. But fear doesn't vanish just because the door gets a new latch, and a week passed. Things returned to normal or pretended to. That Monday, I headed to civics again. Halfway through class, the intercom crackled. "Mrs. Lindstrom, can you send Aaron Thomas to the office? He has an early dismissal." My mom hadn't said anything. Still, I gathered my bag, confused but not alarmed. I walked alone down the hall past the janitor's closet where the first lockdown started, and that's when I saw him. A man standing near the office. Long coat, black beanie. He smiled. My stomach dropped. It wasn't the same man from the bathroom, but it was close, too close. Same smile, same eyes. The secretary opened the office door and said, "There you are, Aaron. Your uncle's here." I didn't have an uncle. I ran out the doors, past the buses. I ran all the way home. Later that evening, my mom confirmed no one had called the school. They claimed it was a miscommunication, a substitute misunderstanding instructions. But I know what I saw. I know who I saw. And now every time I hear the final bell, I glance over my shoulder because I don't think he was ever caught. Not really. And I think he's still looking for a way back. And one of the most powerful messages from these stories is that danger often hides in plain sight, and the illusion of safety can be shattered in a heartbeat. Schools are supposed to be sanctuaries, structured, predictable environments where young people grow, learn, and form lasting relationships. Yet these real-feeling narratives remind us that even in the most familiar places, chaos can arrive without warning. The lesson is not to live in fear, but to remain aware, prepared, and compassionate. Emergencies reveal character. Teachers, janitors, and quiet students alike become protectors, thinkers, and survivors when it matters most. The ability to stay calm under pressure, to act swiftly and selflessly, like the teacher who shielded students from harm or the custodian who hid a teen from a threat, demonstrates how ordinary people can become extraordinary in moments of crisis. These stories also underline the importance of mental health awareness. Many intruders described were suffering lost in untreated illness, paranoia, or delusions. While their actions were terrifying and inexcusable, the system often failed them long before they reached that breaking point. It's a call for communities to improve mental health care to ensure no one slips through the cracks unnoticed and untreated. On a more personal level, the narratives explore the lingering impact of trauma. The protagonists do not walk away unchanged. They flinch at unexpected sounds, avoid familiar places, and live with scars no one else can see. This teaches us to approach others with empathy. We never know what burdens they carry. It also highlights the necessity of support systems. Family therapy and time healing is not instant, but it is possible. Finally, these accounts emphasize resilience and courage. Each character faced something unthinkable, yet they found the strength to keep going, to tell their story, and to grow from it. That resilience is a lesson for us all, that even when life darkens, there is strength in stillness, bravery in small choices, in meaning and survival.